Today's edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPad and iPhone, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPad and iPhone, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. And by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. For a free 10-day unlimited trial, visit lynda.com/MacVoices. Welcome back to MacVoices. This is a Talk of the Mac community. I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, it's going to be no surprise to you at all that we want to talk about Apple's announcements at the Apple event. Today as we record this, probably yesterday as you see it, or later as you see it, where we have new Apple TV, new iPad Pro, and new iPhones, along with some other kind of throwaway announcements that sort of snuck out. And I was really anxious to have Mr. Jim Tanous join me for a couple reasons. First of all, that turns this into a Pennsylvania-only podcast, which is good. Jim, it's good to see you.
It's always good to see you too, Chuck. Yeah, we got to stick together. Us small towners have to fight back against those elitists in the big city who seem to have a monopoly on all the coverage these days.
Those West Coast people, they were just trying to churn stuff out. We've had a chance to reflect a little bit, sit back, absorb, analyze. So hopefully we can add a little something fresh to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second thing, of course, is that you come from the TekRevue site. Even though you have some association with the Mac Observer as well. So you're looking at it a little more arguably balanced because you're looking at it from a more general tech perspective instead of just an Apple perspective.
Yeah, I hope so. I got my start at the Mac Observer, and I owe those guys everything, and they should be familiar to your audience, but I do run TekRevue now, which covers the whole gamut. So it's Mac and Windows and Linux and all the different Android and Windows phones. So it is about Apple, but it's about the broader ecosystem. And so, I tend to notice that a lot of folks who cover Apple, a lot of folks who make the rounds on these podcasts, they're Apple users. They love Apple. That's why they do what they do, and that's great. But they don't get a lot of experience outside of the Apple bubble or the Apple ecosystem. So by necessity, by covering those things at TekRevue, I hope that occasionally I can provide some outside perspective, or at least some comparisons that folks may not have considered before.
Exactly, and there are things that I'm not familiar with. I try to stay abreast of a little bit of what goes on outside of the Apple world, but the Apple world's pretty big at this point, and the general tech world was even bigger. So,
yeah,
hopefully you can catch me if I start running off in a wrong direction.
I don't think you have to worry about it, but I got the taser ready.
Oh, good, thanks. I'm not sure I wanted that much help, Jim.
Yeah, just as a fallback, as a safety.
So what we said we're not going to do is we're not going to just reiterate everything that was announced. Folks, if you didn't watch it, it's probably worth your time to go and watch the actual video of the announcements today. Because it was interesting. It was a 2.5-hour show, which I admit after a while it did seem to drag out just a little bit, even for me. So yeah, that's just the way it is, I guess. But to start with, we'll try to hit the major product categories and just give a little analysis or opinion. I thought it was interesting that they started with the Apple Watch. There wasn't anything really new here that I heard, Jim, just that we have now watchOS 2 coming out in about a week. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much it.
They've already gone over that before two different press events, so there really wasn't much to say there. They've got some new bands, but watchOS, the coverage with watchOS will come with users, and they can really start to put these new features to practice.
Yeah, and something I'm personally looking forward to, because it seems like there are a lot of opportunities in this particular platform. So, but that got us warmed up instead of the usual run through of Apple stores and sales figures and all that, which I thought was interesting that they admitted at 2.5 hours. I'm glad they admitted it. Let's see. So the next up, I guess, was the iPad Pro announcement.
Yep, exactly what we expected.
Yeah, and earlier this evening, our Mac user group meeting. Our Mac user group had our meeting, and there was one gentleman and I that we were debating back and forth. Is this Apple's answer to a Surface Pro? I don't know. You tell me. You're a lot more versed in the Surface world.
Yeah, and I do like the Surface, and I've used the Surface, and the Surface itself is overdue for a refresh at this point. I wouldn't say this is the answer because they're still very different products. So Apple is insisting on sticking with iOS for its mobile operating system, whereas Microsoft, from the very beginning with the Surface, embraced the desktop operating system. Now, there was some confusion there in the beginning because they had an ARM-based platform, which they called Windows RT, that looked like Windows 8 but didn't run legacy Win32 apps. They also had the Pro line, which was a full x86 chipset, so it could run your legacy apps. But basically, the point is they've abandoned that. They're all x86 now going forward. And so they basically have said, let's take the desktop environment and make it productive in a mobile scale. Apple's gone the other direction and said, let's take our mobile environment and let's try to make it more productive for people who want to switch from a desktop. And they were quick to point out when they were announcing this product or announcing the iPad Pro, how fast it is compared to existing Windows mobile devices, laptops and tablets. Now, some of those figures, in typical Apple form of the last couple of years, they're kind of nonsense, but they were, it was interesting to see them quickly point to that as, this is a powerhouse. This is not a consumption device, which is what the iPad has been labeled as, arguably incorrectly, but from the beginning, this is a content creation device. You can do, architecture designs. You can study medicine. You can learn about the solar system. You can do all kinds of things that lend itself better to more horsepower and the bigger display than on previous iPad models.
I was kind of excited to see this. My take on it was that it's targeted at the enterprise for all the reasons you just said. That as much as I dearly love my iPad, there are times that I wish it did have a little bit bigger surface, and definitely the ability to run apps side by side. At least that'll give me two apps on screen. And it's always been a great thing to go and focus on one application, but too often we're working in multiple applications now. So now I've got, I can put things side by side, and I'm kind of excited about this because it feels like for the very first time, the iPad might be something that I would consider a replacement to a laptop in many situations.
Yeah, I've been looking for this as well, and that's it for this for a while there. The Surface was my solution, although it runs Windows. So, and I don't have any problem with Windows on any fundamental level. But most of my productive work is in OS 10. I prefer that interface, and so having an option here, and I've tried so hard over the years to use the iPad as a tool, and it's great if you have a job that has a purpose-built app and you can stay in the app. And like, for example, the local energy company here gave their meter readers iPads, the people who run around and to check your gas usage. And they went and I saw the guy doing it. And for that, it's great. If you're writing though, if you're researching, writing a novel, writing an article for a website like I do, doing, reference for a book or a journal or anything like that, you want to have multiple pages open, multiple documents. You want to be referencing multiple things at once, and you just can't do that on the iPad. And it also is more difficult when you're kind of moving content between apps. So during the keynote for the iPad Pro section, they had Microsoft come out, and they were showing how easy it is to put your Word document on one side and your Excel document on the other, and you can copy charts and stuff back and forth. And you can do that under the old single view system, but you have to close an app, switch to the other one, copy, close it, go back to the first one. It's a process that makes everything take 10 times longer. So to have that option now, and that option is also available on the iPad Air 2, which is good, although because it is a smaller screen, split view doesn't work quite so nicely. You just don't have as much visible area in each app with that configuration.
You just glossed over the fact that Microsoft ended up on the event stage. Mm-hmm. Who is this a win for? Is this a win for everybody? Is it a win for Microsoft? Is it a win for Apple?
It's a win for everybody. And I know this, and you actually got a taste of this with Phil, I think it was Phil Schiller, who was the one who brought the Microsoft folks out. Apple fans, longtime Apple fans, Microsoft's always been the bad guy. They've always been the rival. And he kind of, for those who haven't seen the video, when he announced, we've got a productivity expert who's going to come and show you why this iPad Pro is so great, and it's Microsoft. And then he paused, and there was silence from the crowd, and he kind of went, yeah, see Microsoft. And it was a little childish, but it's getting over that, that history that they have between each other, that it's sometimes brutal and sometimes illegal competition. And the thing is that longtime Apple fans don't get is that Microsoft has completely changed. The last 3 years have seen this company completely change. It's got its new leader, Satya Nadella, who's only the third CEO, who has taken a completely different tone than his predecessors, Ballmer and Gates. They've reached out. They recognized going forward that Windows and Office on the desktop is not going to sustain them as a company, and their enterprise initiatives aren't going to sustain them. They're still very strong there. They make billions of dollars, but that's not the future. And so their point was, let's create platform agnostic services and apps and get them out everywhere. And so that's what they've been doing, which is a huge departure from their previous Microsoft first, Windows first, do whatever it takes to protect Windows. Now it's get it out. And we saw that the touch first version of Office that they demoed today, which came out about a year ago, came out first on the iPad before it came out on the Surface. And then there was an Android version as well. And we're just now, in the last couple months, getting the Windows version. So what a huge change. And so from Microsoft's perspective, the new Microsoft, this is great. They want you to use these apps. From Apple's perspective, it's great too, because if you're a business customer or you're someone who's used Office for years, you depend on it, you're comfortable with it, those apps are going to be there if you come and make the transition to an iPad.
I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think it's a win. It's a win for Apple because there's still people out in the world, in the business world, that buy Microsoft. And it's like IBM used to be. Nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. Well, nobody gets fired for buying Microsoft. Whether it's the best solution for your particular task, that's a matter we could debate probably endlessly. But I felt like that was a good thing because it will make this new iPad, and really any iPad, be taken a bit more seriously in the business world. I really, I heard what you said about the new Microsoft. I can't decide whether it really is a turning of the boat or whether there's just a whiff of desperation that they recognize that the latest Surface has been selling better than the other Surfaces, but none of them have been setting the world on fire. Whether it's a recognition that, okay, they're way behind in the tablet market, they don't think they can catch up, so they've had to develop for the iPad.
Well, I think it's kind of a combination of both. And Ballmer started some of this. I mean, Microsoft started offering apps on iPhone during Ballmer's tenure, and he also made some huge blunders by buying Nokia for all those, however many billions of dollars it was, and making all these entrenched moves that were kind of just a continuation of the existing strategy. And so you see Nadella, though, and I think the reason that Microsoft's CEO selection committee eventually went with him was he's very practical. He doesn't have emotional, or doesn't seem to display any type of emotional loyalties or nostalgia. He's been with the company for 25 years, but he came in and he said, I don't care. I don't care what we've done. And he went through and he's gone through 2 reorganizations, fired a whole bunch of people, broke down the walls that divided the different business units, the Windows unit, the Xbox, the Office, all these groups. They're now under one leader. In the case of Windows, it's Terry Myerson. Mobile's under Joe Belfiore. They've got, they're building an Apple-like leadership where you've got a clear leader, you've got a clear strategy, and that strategy now is just get it out there. And so there's always going to be people at Microsoft who are resisting that, and Nadella has seemed to have no hesitation firing them if they stand in the way. So I do think it is. I mean, they had to make a change. The desperation part is, yes, they had to make a change, but I think Nadella, from a personal level or a genuine level, believes that this is the correct path and is not doing it just because he feels that they have to. There are certainly executives who feel that, but I think from the leadership points of view in this company, it's a totally different guy. It's unrecognizable from just even 5 years ago.
How about Adobe being on stage right there with Microsoft, showing off some graphics software for the iPad Pro? Again, my take is that Adobe is seen as the pros graphics software company, and they want the iPad to be taken very seriously by creative professionals. Never mind the fact that there's a lot of technological advancements that seem to make this right in that wheelhouse. I thought it was an interesting way to validate some of that, especially in the wake of photos and the fact that some of that doesn't seem to be up to professional standards at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Adobe was less surprising, I should say. I guess I would phrase it as, because they've presented at Apple events before. Adobe apps have been very popular on iOS on all the different devices. But you're right. I mean, this was Apple signaling this is our intent to be a professional device. Just like your Office apps are going to be there, your Adobe apps are going to be there. The Apple Pencil is going to give you the flexibility you need to manipulate your documents. Or your photos, your images, and so it was, like I said, I think it was overt signaling from Apple about exactly what this is. There wasn't as much about games. I mean, the games were more about the iPhone. So it was, this is a powerhouse. This is a tool. This is not a toy. And I think that was the message that they're trying to underscore. And they've had that position with the iPad from the beginning, as had the company's fans. But the outside perception has always been, the iPad is more toy than tool, and they wanted to really reverse that or really hammer that point home that that's not true.
Apple Pencil, really?
Mm-hmm.
But when you looked at it, I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I've talked to some graphic artists about this, that they have not been completely satisfied with the iPad because there's some other options out there that are bigger, and especially if they're serious graphic artists. That use their hands, but you know what I mean by that. They're getting these big Cintiq tablets where they have a huge work surface, and now they're going to have a bigger Apple-oriented work surface, and it seems like a completely natural thing, even though some of us recoil because of Steve Jobs' famous comments. But I didn't see that as conflict. And I don't know about you, but the iPad still is perfectly fine using a finger to manipulate and use the interface. It's for the fine grain work that you're going to use this particular device.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised within minutes of that part of the keynote being displayed that people were throwing around these old Steve Jobs quotes. One of them from the biography about if you see a stylus, they blew it, was his quote, I believe. Might be a little off there, but the point was, look how hypocritical Apple is. And Steve Jobs has many examples of this in his career. Nobody reads anymore. We're not going to do ebooks. Well, okay. Nobody wants a video iPod. All right, here we go. But the most important point is the world has changed, and the type of stylus and the type of interaction that Jobs was talking about in 2007 is not what we're talking about today. You had capacitive plastic styluses, and they were the only way to interact with the device, or at least the only reasonable way. And they were on smaller screens, and it was intended for, like you said, Chuck, for like navigating the UI, doing basic stuff. You had to pull the little thing out of the Palm Pilot and tap it on the little plastic screen, and you always lost them. And this is, and they were careful to show this too in the videos with the different tasks you can do on an iPad Pro. This is a complement to the touch interface, and not everyone's going to need it. In fact, I would say if you're not going to be drawing, you probably don't need it. I mean, you can take notes with your finger. You can take notes with many of the cheaper, capacitive styluses that are compatible with the iPad. You don't need it for that kind of basic stuff. But if you're going to be drawing, if you're going to be doing precision work, drafting work for architects and things like that, then it's available, and it's a totally different. It's coming into a totally different environment. It's not going into a smartphone. It's not available. It won't work on your iPhone. Don't buy it for your iPhone. It works only on the iPad Pro. And it's a bigger screen. It's a much more powerful device. And what we're doing on these devices is completely different than 10 years ago. So I don't see the hypocrisy there that some folks are implying. But it is another notch in the, if Steve Jobs says it's not going to happen, it's pretty much the closest thing to a guarantee that it's going to happen eventually. So I like that angle of it.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it exactly that way. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think some of this it gets a little bit childish. because we have seen an evolution of these devices as to what they are used for, what they can be used for. I mean, think back to when the first apps came out for iOS. They were pretty much one-trick ponies. They didn't have a lot of depth. At the time they were fantastic, but now if you look at something that hasn't been upgraded and doesn't have some of the conveniences of the modern iOSs built in, they feel kind of archaic. And so with this just means that the iPad has grown up even one more step, not just in size with the iPad Pro, but also in diversity of function.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. Couldn't say it better.
How about the keyboard? This is where the Microsoft Surface analogy seemed to really run rampant. And I'm quick to tell you that I have a keyboard cover that I use some of the time for my iPad, sometimes not, depending on where I'm going and why I might be needing it. So I see it as perfectly logical, especially for a certain generation. I think there are a lot younger people, especially the kids, who are getting used to typing on glass. But a lot of us have a lot of muscle memory going that we don't want to waste, and it just feels a little more natural to hit a keyboard.
Yeah, and I'm one of those people who prefer the physical keyboard. I've never been anywhere close to as accurate or as fast on the virtual keyboards as I am on physical. I use a Bluetooth keyboard with my current iPad, and it's nice to see them kind of bring in this all-in-one official case. Although we've already seen that Logitech just announced one that they're going to have for the iPad Pro with a keyboard built in. It's going to be lots of the third party. It's a call out to the design of the Surface at a basic level. Having the thing in landscape mode with the keyboard attached to it, and also being an optional, relatively expensive purchase. So I'm glad to see them copy Microsoft there. But it's good to have that flexibility. I want to really get my hands on this particular Apple keyboard before I make any final judgments, because they made some specific references to the MacBook keyboard, the Retina MacBook keyboard, and I'm not a fan of that keyboard. I have not been able to adjust to it, so it'd be interesting to see, how that feels. But even if I don't like it, like I said, there's always going to be third-party keyboards, and you can always go back to a Bluetooth keyboard if you want. There's nothing limiting you there. You don't have to use this new smart connector port. You can still use Bluetooth.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm anxious to get my hands on it. I don't think that if I get an iPad Pro, I don't see myself investing in a keyboard, at least to start. Because that's been the other issue that I've seen discussed now, that a fully tricked out one of these, including an Apple Pencil, is going to be about $1,300, and that's starting to get into laptop territory. But on the other hand,
that's well beyond laptop territory. For Apple starts at what, $999, and all the PC laptops are $500, and I mean they're half the price, if not more. So
yeah, so I think that, and we can might as well just kick over into pricing. These are not inexpensive devices. It's not a surprise, given that Apple always prices things as a premium product, and that shouldn't have come as any big surprise. But do you think the price points might be a little too high, or do you think they're pretty much in line with what we expected and what people will pay?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. There are two aspects of it that surprised me. The first was the 32 gig option at $799. I honestly thought that Apple was going to hit $999 for this thing as an entry level. So that was good. I mean, it's good relatively. I mean, still 32 gigs is not a lot. I was expecting more storage. And then the other kind of weird thing is the only option that it has the LTE modem built in is the top end model. So on both ends, it's a little bit unusual, or it's disappointing. I will say to anyone thinking about getting an iPad Pro, don't bother with the 32 gig model. The apps for this thing are going to be big. The content you're going to be creating on it's going to be big. Unless you're buying a whole bunch of them to deploy in an enterprise setting or in a school where you're only going to be running a certain number of apps and you know how much space you need. If you're just buying this for yourself, don't go with the 32. But you're right. It's priced against some mid to high level Ultrabooks on the Windows side, and it's priced at its maxed out configuration with the keyboard, at least. Maybe not the stylus, because not everyone will need that, but with the keyboard, it's above an Air, and it's actually getting close to the Retina MacBook as well. So it's definitely, you're going to be paying for that portability. You're going to be paying for the unique features. So hopefully Apple's claims about its power and its capabilities will hold up in real world use.
Yeah, and before we leave the iPad Pro, there's one other thing that I thought was very interesting because they spent a couple of seconds on it, and that is that this has 4 speakers, and that it will adjust to how the sound is being channeled, depending on whether you have it in portrait or landscape orientations. So this sounded a little bit more like a consumption device with 4 speakers as opposed to a production device, unless you start talking about audio and video production. Then all bets are off, and it made perfect sense. But I'm just a little surprised that they took the time to put 4 speakers in and engineer all that into this device.
Well, I think I mean, you're right. I think they wanted to make it as attractive as they could for consumers. Again, I think I think the production creative professionals are going to be much happier with this than a consumer, because it is going to be bigger. It's going to be heavier than an iPad Air 2 or an iPad Mini for sure. But if you are a consumer and you do want to enjoy movies and games, it's nice to have that. But also remember too that the SoC, the chipset, the logic board for this thing is going to, we haven't seen it on the inside, but if it follows suit with any other Apple device, it's going to be tiny, and the majority of the space in there is going to be battery. So they probably had plenty of space around the edges to put in those speakers, and it gives it a differentiating factor versus say a Surface, because the Surface is not known for having good speakers. It's not known for good audio quality. So you got this device; it can serve you well in a creative context if you're mixing a audio track or editing a movie, and then if you want to sit back and watch something off iTunes, it's going to give you a good experience there. So it's just another one of those, high end. Let's compare number of cup holder kind of features on the high end automobiles. It's that kind of thing where it's just one more checkbox versus its competitors at that price point.
I'm so afraid if I get my hands on one of these and it's big, it's beautiful, and it sounds even better than my iPad, that it's going to be, oh boy, I really need one of these devices, and I'm anxious too to see the weight, the feel of it in the hand, how much you carry it around. I don't know about you, but I feel like I carry my iPad everywhere that I don't carry a laptop, because it's small, it's thin, it's compact. And I have the impression, because like I'm sure a lot of people have done, I'm kind of drawing it out on cardboard. Okay, so it's this high and this wide, and so we take it and do the angle and do the measurements off the website, and it doesn't. I think it's going to seem a lot bigger and in use, but I don't think it's going to feel a lot bigger, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it is. I'm unsure about that as well, because it is about the same weight as the original iPad, which none of us thought was overly heavy when we first got it. But if you recall too, so the iPad 2, the second gen iPad, was significantly lighter than the first gen. But then when they switched to a Retina display in the third gen model, it added in a lot more weight, and a lot of people noticed that. So once they had the benefit of the iPad 2, that third gen and fourth gen iPads were significantly heavier, notably heavier. But the iPad Pro is bigger, so the weight's going to be distributed over a larger area. And I'm not sure in practice how that's going to handle. Is it evenly? Is it balanced perfectly so that if you put something in the center, it's evenly balanced on both sides? And can you throw it under your arm? And is it going to feel like it's weighing you down? It's going to take some hands-on time to figure that out. But it's also, for me, I think it's the size. The 9.7-inch iPad is about the perfect size for me. The Mini is too small. I've always found the Mini to be too small, especially now that we have the iPhone 6 Plus. But the 9.7-inch iPad is perfect because it slips into my bag. It's a perfect size to hold in one hand for reading, and the screen size is good for reading. So if I'm reading a full-size article or a magazine page, it's about right in terms of its proportional scaling. The iPad Pro will be significantly bigger, so I can do more on it. But in terms of consumption, for like taking it with me to read at the coffee shop or taking it with me to check on email when I'm on the plane, those extra few inches of diagonal real estate are going to create a device that it's going to take some time to get used to. It may be too big for that kind of use case that I and many others have become accustomed to with the regular iPad.
Yeah, you've been reading my mind, or I've been reading yours, one of the two, because a lot of the concerns I have, the places I use the iPad that I don't pull out a laptop for the very reason of size, it could become problematic, and I stress could because neither one of us have had our hands on the device before. So I don't know. It's a device I'm anxious to at least play with, if nothing else. And I'm afraid I'm going to want one way too much.
Oh, I mean, let's not kid around. You're going to have one.
Yeah, we'll see.
I mean, I'm going to talk to you in like 2 months, and you're going to have like 2 of them.
No.
You're going to sling one over each shoulder.
Yeah.
Make a little fort out of them.
No. Calm down. Get the taser.
Yeah, right.
This edition of Mac Voices is sponsored by lynda.com, the unparalleled online video training library. Get a full free 10-day trial at lynda.com/MacVoices. If you're a MacVoices listener or viewer, it's a pretty safe bet that we share some characteristics. You like to learn, to keep up with what's new and interesting in the tech field and beyond. That you are tech savvy to one degree or another. That you want to be more productive and probably need to be more productive, either for yourself or for your vocation. We all have our secret weapons to keep us afloat and ahead of the competition. I'm happy to say that lynda.com is a key piece of my arsenal. No one can learn everything about everything, no matter how hard we try, because tomorrow, next week, or next month, there's even more of everything. If I can learn something from an expert, why would I want to waste precious time trying to figure it out for myself? lynda.com has experts in a wide variety of subjects, tech and non-tech, who will help you learn what you need to learn fast and efficiently, and at your own pace. Say that you need to get up to speed on Google Apps for the office, or want to learn how to work with Camera Raw in Photoshop Creative Cloud, or are interested in learning about entrepreneurship from someone like the one and only Guy Kawasaki. Those are just a few of the recent courses that lynda.com has published. And I mean just a few, because there are all sorts of videos to help you learn about the general concepts of a topic, or the down and dirty details. You can try all of this for a free full 10 days by signing up at lynda.com/MacVoices. During that 10 days, you can watch whatever you want, as much as you want, on any subject you want. No restrictions, no limitations. Try a design course, then a spreadsheet course, then a web publishing course. You pick the topics that suit you, not some limited subset of the collection of over 3,500 courses on lynda.com. Please, do something nice for yourself right now by signing up for 10 days free at lynda.com/MacVoices, then let me know what you decided to watch. Maybe we can trade recommendations. I'm on Twitter as @ChuckJoyner, and I want to hear from you. One last time, lynda.com/MacVoices for a free 10-day trial. Do it now, you won't regret it. Thanks to lynda.com for their support of Mac Voices. So I guess then we move on to the Apple TV. Mm-hmm. And this, from my Twitter feed, this seemed to be generating an awful lot of excitement and buzz. I don't know if it's just because everybody feels that they've been so overdue for this. I guess the things that hit me the most were Siri, the whole Siri thing. I did see some debate, and I have not had the opportunity to go back and re-watch the presentation. Is your impression that Siri, and I'm not sure if this is an iPhone comment or an Apple TV comment, but that Siri is always on now?
I don't think it's always on because, at least according to how I saw I can't remember her name, but the Apple employee who was demonstrating it, she seemed to press a button on the remote before she spoke.
Yes.
So I think that's the distinction between that and, say, something like the Xbox One, where it is always listening.
Yeah. And I think we'll come back to this discussion then with the iPhone too, or iPhone as mm-hmm. well. But yeah, the controller, there's a lot of angst over that. It seemed, by judging, let's see, I believe I had her name, Julie, I think. I don't know. Sorry, I apologize. But judging by, and I love the way they had it demoed so that you could see what her finger was doing versus what was happening on the screen. That mm-hmm. was brilliant because it really did give you an impression that this is going to be a much better remote control device.
Yeah, it's taking a lot of cues from the Roku remotes. The Amazon remote has some similar features. It's a very intuitive way. I know a lot of the Samsung smart TVs have a similar kind of trackpad. Now, Apple's will probably be better. It'll probably be smoother interaction, more responsive. But it's an interaction or an interface mechanic that has been tested and seems to be working pretty well for those who have implemented it. The question for me, though, is the access that. So when Apple demoed this, they demoed, you can ask Siri anything, and she intelligently figures out what you want. What is that drawing from, and is Apple going to place a limit on it? Because we know it is limited. They said that initially it's only going to draw from certain services, the Apple Store, iTunes, Hulu, Showtime, about a handful of pay services. And that's the key. Are they going to limit it to services where they can make money? Or is that kind of interface going to allow me to access my own personal iTunes content, my home movies, my RIP movies? Is a third-party app like Plex going to be eligible to access those APIs? That's really the key for me, because Apple didn't demonstrate anything with Siri that Google isn't doing in Google TV, and that Amazon isn't. Well, actually, Amazon's a little less sophisticated, but Google does everything Siri does as we identified it today. But it's the access. If it doesn't give me access to my own personal content, for me, that's a deal breaker.
I honestly hadn't thought about that part. Because you're right, everything we saw today was pretty much online and did not address the issue of your own content.
Yeah, and people who use a lot of their own content on the current Apple TV know that it's a second-class citizen. You can access it, but you don't get like the pretty metadata and all the big pictures of the cast of the TV show and all that. It's basically, you want your either your home movies or the movie you ripped that you own legally and you've put on your iTunes account. Well, here you go. Here's a list, and you can find it. And if you've added metadata on your own, it'll show up, but it's not presented in the same way. It's a very different experience. And I'm betting right now that they're going to limit it, that it's going to be limited to only the services where Apple can make money, either by selling you a TV show directly from the iTunes store, or by going through one of their subscription partners like Netflix or Hulu, where Apple gets the 30% of the subscription revenue from those services. And that's the path that others have taken too. And so my hopes that Apple would be different in that regard right now are not looking too good.
Yeah, and of course, if I play devil's advocate, Apple's a business, and there actually may be some strange, crazy licensing reasons that they can't do that. I don't know enough about that kind of thing, but it seems like that's where a lot of the problems we're having right now with distribution and access to some of this stuff come, is that, okay, well, you're not licensed, even when you own it, you're not licensed to access it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. That's hard to reconcile, and a lot of us have taken the practical approach that, well, nobody's going to come and kick my door in, and realize that I've ripped this movie from a disc that I own and put it on a computer system that I own to watch it on a TV that I own. But still, that's not the way it is. So we'll have to see. How about something I don't know about you? Are you a gamer?
Mm-hmm. I
Okay.
mean, not in any. I'm not competitive or anything, but I enjoy video games.
Okay, then you're going to be a lot more qualified to give an opinion on the degree of competence of this controller as an Apple TV game controller. Do you think that's good enough, or do you think we're going to have to see third-party game controllers to really make it work?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be good enough for the simple kind of apps, the casual apps that they demoed, the Crossy Road stuff, where that's great. For the games, if Apple wants people to enjoy a little bit more sophisticated games, for strategy games, things that require a little bit more precision and a little bit more flexibility than their current controller, you're going to need to go with a game controller, and they're already coming. There's going to be third-party controllers. A couple companies have already, I think SteelSeries announced one already. They're going to be available, and they look very much like the console controllers now. They look a lot like the Xbox controller. They work. It's the made for iPhone quality assurance or whatever, the licensing program that they've already had. So these controllers work with your iDevices now, and they'll be making some changes to make sure they work with the Apple TV. So that'll open up a new world of control for some of those more complex games that aren't just kind of simple navigation.
Yeah, that was exactly my impression. But again, not being a gamer of any accomplishment, and sometimes I look at some of these current game controllers, and it's like, it's going to take me an hour just to figure out how to use the controller, let alone how to play the game. And it's not worth it. I've got other things to do. So, yeah, that confirms that. And again, you crossed over into another aspect of this. I feel like one of the most exciting things I heard was apps. But we've been waiting for this for a long time. So now does the whole world open up to Apple TV from an app standpoint? And could that start to be could that be an avenue to what you were saying, to our own content, having access to our own content through the Apple TV?
Yes, and that's what I hope. So, like, for example, we'll return to Plex, and I love Plex. I've written about it. They have an iOS app, so obviously Apple has allowed them to exist officially on their other platforms, but they don't have an official way yet to get to the Apple TV. You have to either run the app on your phone and then use AirPlay, or you can jailbreak the TV, and there's some options there. But going forward, now that the App Store will be available, considering how they've been left alone on iOS, I don't see why they wouldn't be brought to the Apple TV as an option. The question is just that integration. Like, will it integrate with the broader kind of discovery and control features with Siri, or is it going to be one of those things where you have to go in and you have to load the app and then you're contained within the app and you don't get the benefits of the other parts of the device or the operating system? But apps, I mean, like you said, yeah, we've been waiting for this. It can be good and bad. I'm a little wary because the App Store has kind of turned into a cesspool in many regards. There's just a ton of apps, and most of them are, with all respect to developers who I know work hard, most of these apps are not worth the time. There's a couple thousand, I'm sure, that are just gems and great. But with like 1 billion apps on the store now, or whatever it is, 1 million apps, the vast majority are garbage, and they clutter it up and they make it hard to find stuff. And if something's not popular and it's not being pushed to the top of the charts, your chance of finding it is slim. The benefit of the Apple TV as it exists now, because the Apple TV has apps, they're just not apps as we think of them right now. They're the apps that Apple has authorized certain content providers to create, and they have different interfaces, and they provide access to movies and TV shows, but they're limited. So you get pretty good quality, and there's not just this ton of garbage in your face all the time. So now that the App Store is coming, that's the question, is after a couple months of developers ramping up, are we just going to have a whole new round of fart apps for the Apple TV? It's, press this button and flatulence is emitted from your speakers. Because that's where we were with the iPhone for a while, and I'm curious to see what happens there.
I'm with you. I am a little concerned about that, but on the other hand, I'm becoming less and less concerned with discoverability, because I really do think the cream rises to the top, and I think that the people that watch this industry and watch this stuff, you can't. I mean, I don't pretend to know exactly what the very best games are, but I think that the word gets out that, okay, this is a really great game. It may not. There may be an obscure little game that really punches your button and you really like it, but the general consensus, I think, is that the word gets out on a lot of this stuff. I do think that productivity apps, I think a lot of the good stuff people are going to find out about. And then there are the software houses we all know and love that have a reputation for just cranking out great applications all the time. So I'm becoming less and less impressed with the charts and less and less impressed with the recommendations, because I'm not always sure what's motivating them, as opposed to people advocating and almost a word of mouth kind of thing being the best way to discover new apps that are worth your time.
Yeah, and that's always going to be an option. You're absolutely right. It's just that my vision is my parents, if I get them an Apple TV and they plug it in and they go to the App Store, are they going to have to wade through pages and pages of freemium games or, copyright infringing apps and all these other the kind of garbage that is the bulk of the App Store as it is today? We don't know. I mean, Apple may be more selective when it comes to tvOS apps, because it is a different experience. You can't as quickly navigate. You've got limited screen real estate because you're working with 1080p, so you can only fit so many apps on the screen at a time. So they may just be more selective, at least initially, with what they approve.
This edition of MacVoices is sponsored by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen, PDF Pen Pro, PDF Pen for iPhone and iPad, PDF Pen Scan Plus for iPhone and iPad, Text Expander Touch, and Disk Label. Find out more about all their great products at smilesoftware.com. Today, I want to tell you about PDF Pen Scan Plus from Smile, the app that turns your iOS device into a document scanner. Sure, you could just take a photo of your documents, but using PDF Pen Scan Plus does so much more. First, it captures your document. Second, it turns it into a PDF, a format that's much more versatile than just a graphics file. Third, if you wish, it will run optical character recognition, usually referred to as OCR, on your document, turning it into a searchable PDF document so that you can find exactly what you're looking for the next time you pull that document up on your iDevice or even your Mac. And speaking of your Mac, PDF Pen Scan Plus also lets you auto-export your documents to Dropbox and iCloud, so your documents are available everywhere you need them. Or you can just store them in your iPhone or your iPad. Your choice. PDF Pen Scan Plus also lets you import and export documents from Evernote, Transporter, and Google Drive cloud services, import scans from your iPhoto library, organize your documents in folders. The list of features just goes on and on. You can get PDF Pen Scan Plus in the iTunes App Store right now for just $6.99. Get it now and make your iPhone or iPad an even more powerful tool for organization and productivity. While you're at it, visit smilesoftware.com to download demo versions of Smile's PDF Pen and PDF Pen Pro for your Mac, and learn more about Smile's PDF Pen for iPhone and iPad, the perfect companions to PDF Pen Scan Plus. Smile, the makers of world-class software. Thanks to Smile for being the longest-running sponsor of MacVoices. So let's see, we've hit the big one so far. The last one is arguably the biggest, and that is the new iPhone, the iPhone 6S and 6S Plus, with a much better camera, according to Apple, much better cameras. Both cameras were upgraded, but the big news seems to be the 3D Touch. And
this is interesting.
Yeah, exactly. I personally, the demos I thought were great. I was trying to describe it tonight to someone, and it's like, okay, what's in use? It's sort of like the right click on or an option click on your trackpad or key or a mouse. That you're going to take something and it's going to have a different context and it's going to respond differently. So that may be a poor analogy. And if you've seen the video, folks, you know what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, go see it and then you'll figure it out.
Yeah, I think right click is actually the perfect analogy. That's pretty much what it is. It's a right click style of additional options, additional interface options for a touch device where right click isn't in a traditional sense isn't available. The problem for me, or the question for me is, how are they going to communicate this to their customers? Because obviously, I'm sure millions of people watch the event or watch the coverage today. Even if it is millions, that's still a tiny percentage of their user base. Apple, on where this basic interface, what they called Force Touch, made its debut, was the Apple Watch, and Apple did not do a very good job of explaining to people how that interface worked on the Apple Watch. And so for months after that device debuted, there were people coming and figuring out, or at least asking for help on how to, where does Force Touch apply? And they didn't know that you could Force Touch to clear all your notifications, that you could Force Touch to change your watch face, or, Apple didn't do a very good job explaining that. So I hope, for our sake and our sanity, as the tech support people for our friends and family and the broader internet, that Apple has some sort of introductory video or something, like when you load the phone for the first time, it kind of goes through and shows you how it works. Even then, however, it's going to take some time. Some of the initial hands-on reviews from folks who were at the event were saying, not every app supports it. Not every app that supports it in all features that you would think it would. And so you're going to be sitting there trying to do a 3D touch on something, and it's not going to work. And there's really no visual indication of where 3D touch applies inside all these apps, especially third-party apps. So it's going to take some time for developers to implement it and for some sort of standard understanding of where you can 3D touch and what it will do when you do that. That's going to take some time, because otherwise it's just going to be sort of a trial and error. Like, oh, can I tap on this? Oh, nothing happened. Okay, how about this? Oh, okay, well that does that. And if I do it on this other app, it does something else. And so that's an interface challenge that Apple faces.
There's a lot you and I don't know about the APIs and how how 3D touch, got to get it right. 3D touch is being implemented here, because obviously it has to be, I guess, integrated into the apps, or are there just going to be certain things that anytime you do it? I think the one they showed was an address. So is it going to be any time that if the text there is recognized as an address, that it's going to be able to click over? Excuse me. Let's see. What was it? You're going to be able to peek at it in Maps and then or pop it out so that the map stays.
Right.
Got to learn the new lingo.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the question. Is it going to be a consistent experience, and even is it going to be an OS-wide thing, or will an address in a third-party app not support it unless the developer specifically supports it? We have to wait and see.
Yeah, but even I mean, in a way, I'm relieved that there's not, they aren't changing text color, or changing colors, or highlighting something around just to say, oh, push here, because that would just, I think, clutter the experience up. So I'm kind of okay with the fact that I may have to push and see if anything happens, because I think it's going to, that by itself is going to encourage developers to make something happen when I push on it, if it makes sense to have anything happen.
Yeah, and I think what we'll see, and it will be rough for the first couple months, maybe 6 months, but we will see that a convention emerges, whether it's under Apple's explicit direction or whether things just work out better one way or the other, that developers and users will figure out, okay, these are the types of situations where that's going to be available, and this is generally what it's going to do or what it's going to offer me. And that'll just emerge, and it'll become, standard knowledge, or at least standard knowledge for those who are frequently using their devices, familiar with their devices.
You think back again to go with the option click or the right click, or is it left click? I don't know. I don't use a mouse. I use a trackpad. So anyway,
well, you can right click or you can option left click.
Option left click. Okay. So I guess the point is, there was a lot of stuff under those menus that people didn't even know that people still don't know is there, and so I'm not sure if that's a failure on Apple's part to get people more in tune with that, or if it's just the fact that they're trying to deliver more sophisticated, fine-grained controls and things. A lot of people take advantage of them, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah, I think that's the right way of looking at it. That's what's going to happen, or what's happened is that nothing essential is in that menu. It's the more power tools, the more fine-grained controls that somebody who could go and use it, who was looking for it or who knows it's there, will find. It's not an essential aspect of the interface that, if you can get by on OS 10 in general with just a single left click or left tap on your trackpad.
Okay, the cameras. The cameras, I think anytime you can improve the camera quality is great. Apple seems to have done a little bit more Apple magic and are getting theoretically better pictures, and we haven't seen them yet, but theoretically better pictures out of the megapixels and sensors that are there, and also are delivering 4K video, which I personally kind of find exciting, because there were some third-party apps that could give you 4K video out of the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus, but they didn't always work very well, and so now the ability to have 4K native is impressive, and I'm looking forward to it. But it also means I'm probably going to buy more storage, because that is going to stack up quick.
Yeah, that's the big thing with consumers moving to 4K. I mean, 4K is being promoted because the TV manufacturers want to sell another round of TVs, like they did with the 1080p transition. It didn't work out for the 3D transition, so now they're pushing 4K, and the Japanese are already doing 8K. So there's just a lot of hype around it for the average consumer. But the one aspect of it is you're talking about, it's not exactly a linear increase of 4 times the size, but because there's some compression stuff going on, but significantly larger files. And I know Phil Schiller was talking about the iPad Pro, and he says, oh, look, you can edit 3 streams of 4K videos simultaneously. And I was thinking, like, if you bought that 32 gig model, you're going to get about 10 minutes of those 3 streams, and then your whole iPad's going to be filled. So you're going to have to play. If you want to shoot 4K, plan for it. Plus, also realize it's 4K resolution technically. The optics aren't there, though. It's not going to match the 4K that's coming out on some of these prosumer camcorders, some of the DSLRs that shoot 4K. The pixel densities or the pixel clarity. I can't remember. There's a name for it, but there's a an optical effect that occurs if you don't have enough size, if your pixels aren't enough size. And Apple talked about a similar effect and how they've dealt with it. But you're going to get really good video quality. It's not going to be as good as it could be for a true 4K, high-end 4K camera, but it's coming on your phone. So I think it's a good trade-off.
Yeah, that's the thing we have to remember, folks. It is a phone, or it's a device we put in our pockets. It's been one of my pet peeves for a long time. I think we need to stop calling this thing a phone. It has phone capabilities, but it's, Star Trek took tricorder, so we can't use that. But I think we need to find a name for this device that, because we keep saying it's just a phone. Well, it's not just a phone anymore.
Right. It's a supercomputer in your pocket. I mean, basically, for 10 years ago, you take this, you show it to somebody, they'd think you were, out of your mind. It's really come a long way.
How about live photos? This is interesting to me.
This was.
Is it eye candy, or is it something useful?
It's cool. I don't know what Apple's talking about, where they said we spent so much time figuring this out, and we've developed new technologies, and it's an animated GIF image, and it's not using GIF image encoding, but the point is, if you took as for the last 6 months, if you use Google Photos, if you upload a burst of photos that are all in rapid sequence, Google will make a live photo for you automatically. They don't call it that, but that's what it is. It's a GIF file, and it's a little sort of animated movie of that 1 or 2 seconds around the photo you took. So Apple's bringing it, you don't have to do anything extra. It just does it automatically. And what it's doing is just capturing with burst, whether you have it enabled or not, the surround as well as audio, it sounds like, saving that in some compressed format and then making it available to you if you want it. The problems are it's going to be limited to where you can enjoy it. They said, you have to basically be running a modern Mac or running a modern iDevice to be able to view it. So you can't just upload it to your website, it looks like. And it's okay. I mean, it's going to be, there's going to be moments where you capture and you got the kids on the couch and they're shuffling around, and you get the picture, and then you go back to look at the live photo, and it's this cute little moment of the kids moving around, and that's great. But it's like I said, it's something that's been available for a while now, and it's not a feature I'm looking forward to, and I'm sure people will enjoy it, but it's just one of those things. I don't see it's not a huge deal. It's one of the minor points of moving to an iPhone 6S or 6S Plus.
Yeah, I'm interested to see just how the file size addresses this, because it seems like there has to be something in the metadata that has those extra frames. That so I can give this file to you, and you can look at it on a PC or an older device that doesn't support it, and it's going to look just like a photo. Or you can put it on a new device, and you're going to have those extra frames. I don't even know how many seconds we're talking about. It doesn't look like many.
Yeah, it's probably just 1 or 2 seconds on either end of the actual photo that you intended to capture. And it's probably just using some sort of package format, like they package iWork documents for PC, where it's basically a zip file, but it appears to the OS as if it's in the case of a photo, it'll appear to the OS as a photo. And if the OS supports the live photo, it can go in and read the package contents to get the other images and sound. And if it doesn't, it just displays the photo. That's the technical stuff behind the scenes is interesting on one level, but the reality is if you want to enjoy these, you're going to be limited in where you can share them, where you can use them.
Let's see, anything else big that I'm missing? I mean, we have the new metal, which is supposed to eliminate the whole bend gate question. They talked about the glass being harder than ever. Was there anything else major? I guess that the Retina flash for selfies. I saw a couple people say, well, weren't there apps that would do that? I don't know if there were.
Were
there? Okay.
But they never, I guess Apple's point here is it's built in, and they're doing some white balancing to make sure that the flash that comes off the screen is appropriate for the subject. It's not, because the apps that did it would just basically turn the whole screen bright white for a second and then off, and that's not necessarily the right kind of color tone that you're going to want for a photograph or a selfie. But that's another interesting option that plays to the younger crowd who are I missed that boat, so I don't understand it. But obviously, selfies are huge, and that's a great option there that makes them better. Plus the 3D touch to quickly access that selfie mode. That's interesting. I think it's interesting that the iPhone's going to shoot 4K video, but that your Apple TV won't be able to play back native 4K resolution. That's an interesting limitation. I understand probably why they did it, but that's kind of disappointing. But yeah, that's it. I'm looking forward to the stronger metal, because I don't know anybody who has an iPhone 6 or 6 Plus that doesn't have like a ding or a dent in their casing if they didn't have a full wraparound case on it. So that'll be good.
Yeah. I think it's a good S level upgrade. I mean, for me, the camera would have been nice, but it wouldn't have been enough to make me upgrade. The 3D touch is what is kind of driving my desire to upgrade, because I just think this is going to open up a whole new level of function that I'm anxious to get my hands on, and I'm anxious to see what developers do with it.
Yeah, I think obviously 3D touch, as well as the alleged performance increase, for me was pretty interesting. I mean, that's some pretty bold claims in terms of performance improvements over the 6 and 6 Plus. So looking forward to testing that and seeing how that plays out, because it is remarkable how quickly and how far we've come since 2007, to reach these levels of performance. Or we're still not at desktop level, and we probably never will be, because the desktop just has advantages in terms of thermals that the phone can't compete with. But man, you're getting close to that, to the goal that I want to see, which is my phone is my only device, and I can plug it into a monitor and it becomes a desktop, and I can plug it into a tablet, like a dummy tablet screen, and it's a tablet, or I can keep it in my pocket and it's a phone, or whatever we want to call it now. But we're getting there. It's if their performance increases are as much as they say, that's going to be pretty impressive for pretty much anything anybody wants to do on a device like this.
Yeah. 2 throwaway announcements I wanted to mention before we get out of here. The first one was that there was an upgrade to the iPad Mini. Sort of an upgrade. It was almost I guess it was an upgrade if you looked at the Mini form factor, because they took an iPad, was it iPad 3, iPad Air 3, or iPad Air 2, and said they shrunk it down. Do I have the model right?
Well, basically so you had the Mini 3, which didn't get an update last year, or I guess it got an update. It got the Touch ID, but it didn't get a processor update. And so they've basically just taken the processing capabilities of the Air 2, which is now a year old, and given it to the Mini. So the Mini and the Air are now on par, although they're both using a year or so out of date technology.
Yeah. And if it's just the processing power, that'd be one thing. I don't know if it got the camera upgrades. I didn't see any. They didn't mention it. I have no idea.
They did not mention it, so I would assume they would have mentioned that. They basically just said we took the processing power of the Air 2 and put it in the Mini. So, yep.
Yeah. The other one, actually, come to think of it, there are 3. This is the trouble with the little throwaways. Now, all of a sudden, Apple is going to have their own little program in-house to let you get an iPhone every year, a new iPhone every year, which flies in the face of a couple of the carriers' programs that started last round. And I think it's interesting that they did it so quietly and so easily, and there are a million questions surrounding this, but it felt like that was a little bit of gamesmanship with the cell carriers.
Yeah, it absolutely was, and it is interesting, and it's something that I caution consumers who are interested in a program like that. They really need to understand the details, read the fine print. You're not just loaning a phone, or Apple's not loaning a phone to you. You're entering into a financial agreement, a credit-based financial agreement with their credit provider, and I'm not sure who it is this round, but they're working with a bank. It's just like doing it with a carrier, except you get to go through the Apple Store to do it. It works out to about $100 more over the course of the 2 years. You have to commit to 2 years, but after 12 months, you can go in, commit to another 2 years, trade your phone in, get the next one. So you're just kind of continuing on. And you're right, it's similar to the carrier plans. One thing I'll caution, though, is that the carriers have, as they've rolled this out, I'm not sure about T-Mobile, but at least in terms of AT&T and Verizon, in order to entice their customers into this plan, they've waived the activation fees because they've got these asinine activation fees whenever you get a new phone. It's like, oh, we had to talk to you on the phone for 30 seconds while you gave us the unique ID number. That's $40, please. And so they waive it for customers who are doing this sort of credit-based payment cycle through their own programs. I doubt they're going to waive it if you come from Apple. So, keep in mind that, if you go to Apple, you're going to pay a little bit more than if you had just bought the phone outright, and you're going to have to pay that activation fee. And then you're going to have to keep the phone in good condition, because if you keep it for 2 years and you don't want to trade it in, okay, then you own it at the end of 2 years. If you go to the trade-in at 12 months and it's damaged, you're going to have to use one of your Apple Care Plus incident plans, which I think is $79. And if by some chance you've used both of them, you either can't trade it in, or you're going to make you pay the full $199 for an out-of-warranty repair or replacement. So there are some caveats there. It's a contract. It's an arrangement. It's a financial arrangement, and you're going to be beholden to Apple in some way. But I think if you're into that, if you're okay with, if you're going to upgrade every year, and you don't mind paying a little bit more over time versus having to shell out the money all up front, it's a good option, and it gives you an option of dealing with Apple if you don't want to deal with your carrier, which I wouldn't blame you if you want to skip that.
Yeah, this is one thing I hope you or someone writes up a good comprehensive article, because I think, and interestingly, we have the Saturday, as we record this on Wednesday, we have a Saturday order date for the iPhones. And so, a lot of us are going to be looking for information on what are my options, what are my best deals. Do I need to buy out of my contract? And if I do, I'm going to, do I own my phone? Do I give my phone back? What kind of pricing? I mean, it's a bit of a mess, and I hope there's some advice out there for folks, because I think there are a lot of people that are hot to do this, but they can only commit so much money to it.
Right. I will say, just to be clear, through an Apple retail store. So that's one limitation. You have to actually go to a store. So if you don't have an Apple store near you, you're not eligible for this. And they even say on their store page, on pre-order day, you got to go line up at the store to get your order in. And then in terms of actually, it's not specific to this program, but if you're new to the sort of credit-based, pay for the phone over time model, Dave Hamilton at the Mac Observer did a piece on AT&T's Next plan. It was about a year ago. I'll try to find that. We'll put it in the show notes, which really goes over how this works, what the cost savings are. Because if it's just an individual, if you can afford to put the money up front and you're just an individual, it's probably not a good idea. But if you're a family and you're constantly upgrading all these devices, there's a point at which it works out financially in your favor. So we'll get a link to Dave's piece over there, and he does a really good job explaining that. And I'm sure he'll want to update that piece with the new Apple information.
Yeah. One last thing to just mention about it before we move on is that I have to wonder if you're hot to get the phone on that first day, whenever it actually comes out. I can't help but wonder who's going to get satisfied first, Apple direct customers or carrier customers. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, it's been a balance they've been facing forever now. I mean, since first phone. So they pre-allocate a certain number for their carriers, and they keep enough for their own stock. And I don't think that this Apple financing program is going to be a huge thing. I think a lot of the market is already limited by who's eligible to upgrade and who's willing to pay if they're not eligible. And then, like I said, this carrier option or this loan option may not be your best financial option. There may be cheaper alternatives to your carrier if they're going to waive fees, things like that. So. This is a nice thing to have. It's interesting. We'll see how it plays out. I don't think this is going to set the world on fire this round.
Last thing, and this was really a throwaway announcement. We now have better pricing for iCloud storage. Mm-hmm. And I thought this was really interesting just to shove it in there at the end of the day. But the 1 terabyte for $9.99 a month, I think it's 200 gigs was it? I have to look at my notes. Yeah, 200 gig for $2.99, 50 gig for 99 cents. This feels a lot more in line with some of the things that we saw coming out of other storage companies, cloud storage companies. And it's good to see Apple do that, because now I think people will start to look at iCloud as a lot more viable option.
Yeah, the iCloud pricing before the changes last year was way out of whack with other online services, and then after the changes was still not a great value, considering that it's integrated with the phone and all that. But this is a much better pricing scheme. It also somewhat, one of the questions I hear a lot is, why can't I share my iCloud storage with my family? And because we've all got iPhones, I don't want to have everyone linked to my own iCloud account for uploading photos. We want separate accounts. We can share apps. We can share all these other things. Why can't we share storage? Because someone in my position, I have my wife, and I've got family that are on my iCloud account, or used to be on my iCloud account. Now I have to have separate accounts for each, and so you still have to do that. But at 99 cents for 50 gigs or whatever it was, the minimum level, at 99 cents a month, that becomes a much more viable solution. It's not as painful on the wallet to go that route. But I would like to see Apple extend iCloud storage to the family plan, or the family sharing infrastructure that they have there. So you can just buy the 1 terabyte or whatever and share it and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, and at 50 gigs, you have a much better chance of, if you don't stack things up with photos, of being able to back up to your device to the cloud. And I really, really like that, because I've been one that's been a little hesitant. It's like I seem to be paying for a lot of different storage, a lot of different places, and okay, I can back up my phone just as easily and fast to my Mac. And now I think I'm going to seriously look at doing the cloud backup thing. I think it makes a lot more sense. Will make it easier to recover my phone if anything goes wrong, and suddenly it becomes pretty affordable.
Yeah, it's an option. I mean, there are, if you want to stay in the Apple world, you're going to pay what they say. So it's good to have them reduce the price. But there are Dropbox, Google Photos, OneDrive. All of these offer photo upload that automatically grabs your camera roll and uploads it, and they all have comparable, if not better, pricing. So it's might be worth it too. If you have a lot of photos, you can still have your iCloud account, iCloud storage, but maybe do the photos through another service that's more economical.
Yeah. There are going to be a lot of articles written and a lot of information to absorb here as we go through the upgrade cycle for all of these devices. I think it's kind of exciting, because it seemed like things were getting a little stagnant, and Apple really, really delivered on a lot here. And it's going to take a while for us to understand everything. Last question for you. Rose gold for you?
No, thank you. I like to stick with the plain. I call it black, but space gray, I guess, is the answer. So
yeah.
I'm not stylish enough to pull that off.
I don't know. I've told this on the show before, but last upgrade, I got a white iPhone 6 Plus. Mm-hmm. And I ended up turning it back in, because the phone worked fine, but just trying to watch video on it or anything, it just really bugged me. I wanted to go back to the black face, just like you would a television monitor. I don't want chrome or white or anything around it. But I don't know. I can't decide if I'm just old school or whether it's just the way I like the video presented, but it bothered me.
Yeah, I can understand that. I feel the same way. I like minimal design. I don't want any type of flashy, anything that's going to distract my eye from what I'm looking at on the screen. So for me, that's the space gray model. And if people like to have a fashion statement with their phone, they like other colors. That's great to see an additional option there for those folks. But you'll always find me in the corner with my my black shirt and my space gray iPhone. Really standing out, really pushing the boundaries of fashion and design.
Jim, thank you so much for the time. It's been a good discussion. I hope we gave some people some information they didn't have, maybe a few things to think about, and at the very least, I hope they enjoyed it. And we'll get you back on again soon. It's always a pleasure.
It's pleasure is all mine, Chuck. And real quick, too, folks, be on the lookout for El Capitan to launch September 30th, which is about a month earlier than it usually launches. So that was a little peek that Craig Federighi gave away with his demonstration today. So.
And that was planned. It was just a question of
yes.
who was going to see it. Yeah. So yeah, good point. Good point. Yeah, there's a lot in this presentation, folks. So I'll make sure I have a link. I mean, go to apple.com. You won't have any trouble finding it, but I'll make sure I have a direct link so you can jump there and set aside 2.5 hours to enjoy it.
You can fast forward through some of it.
Yeah, one or two. So, Jim, one more time. Website, Twitter presences. What else you got where people can find you?
Yep, you can find me every day at TekRevue.com, and TekRevue is spelled a little differently. It's TekRevue.com, and you can find me on Twitter, both at the TekRevue handle, spelled the same way, or my personal handle, which is MGGJim.
Great. Good to see you, my friend.
You too.
Take care. Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is Mac Voices. Let us know what you thought about the Apple announcements. We're curious. Did you find something you just can't live without, or are you going to be sitting out a couple of these upgrades this round? Until the next time, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for links, show notes, to subscribe, to connect with Chuck on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and the Mac Voices blog. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter, the Mac Voices Dispatch, to stay up to date on all the latest Mac Voices news from our front page or at macvoices.com/newsletter. Do more with your Apple tech by subscribing to the free Mac Voices magazine on Flipboard by visiting macvoices.com/magazine. Advertising and sponsorships handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.